good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're consuming this broadcast. Welcome to BasTalk. Long time no see, no hear. Apologies in advance. But without further ado, let me just bring the new listeners in. If you're tuning in for the first time, BasTalk talks about stuff that happens every day at work. Simple, no mumbo jumbo, no fluff stuff, straight talk. It's a slow burn, solo. There aren't any star guests, and clearly it doesn't offer any life changing advice either. But if that's what floats your boat, then you are tuned into the right show. As always, I look around the network, I look around the environment, read a lot of stuff that's happening in and around, and pick up one or two things that caught my eye. And today I'm going to remind you about something you must have heard at work. Could be a cliche, but haven't you heard this phrase before? It doesn't matter what you said, it matters what they heard. Perceptions become reality. That's what we're going to talk about today. How many times you intended to say something, it meant something else to the recipient, and then broke loose. At your workplace, perception often outweighs truth. A manager, for example, who's very strict, has a reputation of being a taskmaster, may also be seen as unfair. A colleague who is quiet may be branded as arrogant. And before you know it, those perceptions become reality, influencing promotions, trust, team dynamics, and even career growth. Many times you've heard the word softy, and just because someone is being polite, they are often branded as being softy. They could be very tough and hard, on the other hand, but they choose to be polite. That triggers a perception as well. So let's unpack how workplace perceptions shape culture, careers, confidence, and how probably you can take your own narrative before someone else writes it for you. Let's first level set the office layout or the office perception layout. I know many of you will think that, well, my office is different to someone else's office, and that could well be true. The organizational culture that is driven top down is probably different. But if you were to have some standard things to have at least a level playing field, say if there are 10 things that define a common office culture, can we identify two or three things that are common across all offices, irrespective of different cultures? So I'll give you an example. It's true that the demography plays a big role in organizations where the average work ex is 5 to 10 years, has a slightly different vibe to the place. For most organizations, there is a mix, which means there is a smaller percentage of 5 to 10 years, a larger percentage of, say, 7 to 18 or 20 years, and a smaller percentage of leaders, right? So that is the mix that most have. So if that is the base data, then some of the common situations that happen across most organizations are as follows. One, attention spans are very low across all levels. Low at the lead. Let's start from the top, like low at the leadership level, low attention spans, and low at the mid management level because of all the pressures and uh, tensions that you go through. And then, of course, at the entry level, because of whatever you're in an early career stage, you are in your early 30s or late 20s, you have a low attention span given the nature of the situation. I know it's in ageism terms, we're talking about three generations: Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs under one roof. And if you're so blessed, you'll probably even have some boomers. And so that makes for a very complicated workplace culture. But the common thread that ties all of them is low attention spans. And so I mean, isn't that fascinating? People from four different generations have the same problem, just very little patience. The young people have little patience because, well, they're born into impatience and instant gratification. The millennials are the entitled generation, as many call it. And so they're frustrated because why do I need to fight for all of this again? And so get on with it. And then Gen Xers, who have gone through it for most part, who've seen a bit of both eras, if you will, they're like, yeah, I've had enough of this. So their attention spans are low. And then boomers, they're like, oh God, not again. And so their attention spans are low too. And it impacts people in various ways. So when a boomer, and I'll go top down, right? So when a boomer has a low attention span and a Gen X is reporting into a boomer, then they find it difficult, but they're somewhat in tune with how a boomer reacts and responds. So they're able to adapt relatively better and quicker to adapt to the boomer. But sometimes boomers have really low attention spans, and so the Gen X also gets confused. And if there are instances where there are deadlines and pressures, then the communication between the two breaks down. But if you go further down, which means if a millennial is reporting to a boomer, then that the distance increases 2x. There is no relative overlap or minimalistic overlap, and so culturally very different. Let's look at and that stems all frustration and communication and impatience, right? And then you have Gen X, or rather a millennial report into a Gen X, ideological differences in the way work is to be done, and so patience levels differ. When sometimes the Gen Xers tend to think, well, I know how this is going to end. Why go through the whole shebang? Why won't you listen to me? While the millennial says, well, you tried this for a long time. Why not do it in some other way? And so there is, again, the common thread of low attention spans, with each not able to understand what the other is trying to say, or the other's perspective leads to confusion. And the last bit, when Gen Zs are in reporting into millennials or Gen Zs reporting into Gen Xs, oh God, that is tough because there is very little overlap and very little understanding of not just the work style, but even the lingo, right? And I've mentioned this on a side note separately. When did all things good become sick? Oh my God, this is so sick. That's Gen Z lingo, right? And I was like, sick is supposed to be sick in most parameters, that you are unwell, or this is sick, that it's something bad. But as it turns out, in Gen Z lingo, sick is something which is dope, which is good. I don't know when dope became good, but then it did. And so when all this happens, and it's commonly tied with low attention span, then there is bound to be misunderstandings. And Lord help you if you are not working in the same location. And so there's often misreading on the body language, on the choice of words that come on a video call, and perceptions trigger. And so all said and done, whichever combination that you take, perception do become a reality silently. It comes back to haunt you. Uh, because comes back to haunt you at a wrong time. Read appraisals, read promotions, or any of those times, right? And you said, hey, if only you had told me that one shouldn't argue, then I wouldn't have. Then the manager's saying, well, you shouldn't have argued. Why would you argue when I've made a decision? But then the guy says, well, I thought presenting a counter opinion is healthy for the business. And the manager says, I've already thought through that, and so you don't need to. And so you see where I'm going with this, right? And that eventually perception is created over a small conversation, but has a almost like a snowball effect towards critical situations like discussions on appraisals or promotions or what have you. because human brains are wired to judge quickly. The classic example, the always late colleague who works till midnight, midnight unseen, right? Like is always late. You will see a typical, oh, I came in late, I'm so busy. The always pretend to be busy. They're always in a rush. They're like, oh my God, there's so much is happening. What do I do? And so yet when you really pause them down and say, what exactly are you doing again that you look so rushed and so busy all the time? Turns out there's very little. But the perception they trigger around them that they are restless, they're relentless, they're always ahead, and all they can package it well under the garb of efficiency and speed and need for speed and all those kind of things. But the actual quanta of work hasn't dramatically changed, but they emanate a perception that they're super busy. And so it creates a perception that they must be really working hard, right, late until midnight. There are many discussions because people don't, many times, many leaders don't double click into that perceived hardworking. That what is it that they are doing so much that they are always busy? And because they don't double click, that perception starts to become a reality and say, oh, next project comes, why don't we give them a chance, because he's been around, he's been really pushing it. Very difficult to argue with this because there could be a chance when, I mean, there's no inspection guide, right? That, three people or four people who are in a huddle room or in a boardroom discussing, the next promotions or the next growth factors, and two, three names come up. It's not like they're going to go on an inspection drive to see if that person is really working hard. Everybody's working hard. They deliver their projects on time. They will deliver their results. They do their revenue if they're in sales, and they do their stuff, right? So uh, it is true that the optics play a role in building your perception at work. If you are, dressed well, people tend to take you more seriously. Yeah, especially Gen Zs, if you're listening to this, if you dress well, then people take you more seriously. Don't out logic it, don't contest it. It generally works well. Now, by dressed well, meaning dress a little more formally, that triggers a perception that, this person is serious, and you can contest it, you could argue it, like, how does that matter? What matters is what I code or what I write or what I sell, whatever the role that you might be doing. But it these, that's why I said perceptions become reality. And so you trigger a perception that you're too casual about the task at hand or the job at hand, because the person who's generating this thought in their mind is not confronting you with it up front, right? But this plays a role somewhere, rightly or wrongly. Right? You could argue that my role does not demand me to be dressed in a suit or tie. The counter argument is, well, you don't need to dress in a suit or a tie, just so that you know. You don't need to dress in a suit or a tie, but you definitely need to be in formals. That's not too much to ask if you're going to work, is it? You don't need to mimic, torn jeans and slippers and a ragged t-shirt to office to show that you're a geek. Not needed, right? So again, I'm also colored by the fact that I belong to the latter generation of leaders, Gen Xers. So that's how most Gen Xers would look at it. If you are blessed with a leader who does not care about all this, then that's a different conversation, of course. Let's move on. So the point one was perception often becomes a reality, but it is, as in the optics often become a reality. So optics trigger a perception, perception becomes a reality, if I were to just complete that part. Next, the silent career killer, how unchecked perceptions can derail promotions, the danger of being perceived as disengaged even while delivering results. Many introverts out there who are listening, they generally keep to themselves, they're quiet, they sit in their corner, and their philosophy is, I'll do my job and do it well. I don't need to tom about it. I don't need to blow my own trumpet. And often, in if you're surrounded in an extrovert surrounding or a culture which has those characters who are perpetually showing, closely linked to the always busy kinds, that I am just, you know, nailed this one. I've just done a fabulous job and all that. And even though if it is, for example, you sold lesser licenses, this is a sales context, but you made so much noise, make it sound, it was so complicated, it was so strategic, it was so difficult, and it kind of plays into the plays to the gallery where the leader says, "Oh my God, look, with all the difficulties this person is able to do because everyone else is trying to complain about those difficulties." And so the leader is looking for someone who says, "No, no, despite these difficulties, I have done a great job." Well, when you double click on that, it's just very small quantity of licenses than, say, the introvert who probably has done double that amount and made 50% less noise. It is always the case where the more quieter you are about the work that you do, the higher its chances of getting ignored or overlooked, and worst case, misunderstood. And just because you were chose to be nice and quiet, and there could be a set of people who think, ah, this person is disinterested, has no emotions, no reaction. Maybe they are looking out for a job. They're quiet quitting mood. And you argue that no, no, they're doing their numbers. Yeah, I know, but they are um, they are probably not a good culture fit. So be careful how you present yourself. Again, closely related to the optics that you present at the workplace. Again, closely linked. Many of them will be closely linked. All the content that you will hear on this particular topic will have some overlap, right? And rightfully so. So the next point is, the positive spin versus the negative stigma. Just like I said, a little while earlier, that people often spend copious amounts of time and bandwidth on why this will not work. Versus there are a few who say, let's see what does it take to make it work. And so if you're trying to be this person who's trying to promote critical thinking, like, look, if everybody's thinking the same, then someone is not thinking. So I will take up the role of doing the critical thinking, do the beta testing, as it were. But all your good intent of doing critical thinking is landing as a negative connotation. That this person is negative, is not positive, is always looking at things why it will not work. And if they are so tired and so critical, so cynical that this will not work, why are they even here? And so that triggers a perception. So even if you feel something very strongly, there's a thin line between being right and being liked. So yes, there is a way of critical thinking. Abandoning critical thinking may not always work, and that's the tough part. That if you completely abandon your critical ability to judge a situation, then that will have a counter. It could come back and hit you, for all you know, right? If nobody spotted a mistake in the spiff, for example, or some terms and condition, and you did, and you chose to keep quiet about it, then it clearly will come back and hit you, right? And so it's important to be able to communicate the negative, so-called negative, or the different thinking, let's put it in a positive spin, different thinking, which is wrapped neatly between two positive comments. So you start with a positive comment, which is appreciating the situation. You insert the critical thinking component. Can it, should it, will it, does it? Those you kind of almost like, it's a leading indicator or a leading question. And then, of course, you pack it with a reaffirmation statement saying, no, I totally get that it's great. For example, somebody wants to go and touch a compete account where competition is 100% there, and they're saying, we will try and do three things to break into this account and convert them. Now, the way you would need to give this feedback to them is, that's great. I mean, somewhere we need to go out there and try something different. However, typically when we have tried this in the past, we have seen two or three challenges which are beyond our control, and so that's why we have parked it aside in the past. While I think we still need to do some changes, I completely agree. Can we look at a couple of other additional options to the one account that we have selected? So I know it's a long-winded way of saying, but it kind of softens the blow, because another factor is that people have they get very defensive very quickly. If you challenge or contest someone's ideas, they get very defensive. And it could be you as well. And if think of those times when somebody said, you could have done this better. And immediately your defenses, your guards go up and say, what do you know? How do you know that what I went through? Right. So, as much as we would like to point a finger at someone being defensive or critical about their idea, you too get critical and defensive. So, and if you don't, then leave me a comment below that no, I have never been defensive or to negative feedback about me. So, anyway, long story short, idea is to make the things work, right? And then figure out how to make it work. There's no two ways about it. There are constraints. There always will be constraints, right? There will be friction. There will be a challenge. If it was such a walk in the park, then you wouldn't have the job, isn't it? So it is difficult, but don't always come across as the kill buzz, always the bummer, as it were. Like, oh my God, he's kind of deflated the entire morale of the team when they were just about to pick up. And you scratch your head and think, well, I was just trying to make sure we are not on the wrong train, right? So sometimes it's good to play along, and sometimes it's good to pull the chain and say, hey, look, but all this needs to be presented in a more, let's say, positive way or a diplomatic way if you can. Tough, I know. Even articulating this, I'm like fumbling for words, and I'm thinking, how else does one do it? You will get it right sometimes and you won't sometimes, and that's okay, right? So, but at least don't be overtly negative if you disagree with something. Next, managing your personal brand at work. It's importance of communication and visibility. Oh, I cannot stress more on this. It is super critical that you build a brand at work, but small habits that shape how others see you, the tone of your conversation, the zero typo email, your body language, your sense of dressing, your sense of what would people remember you as when you're long gone? Something to think about, right? How would people remember you? Do they remember you as the funny person, the serious intellectual, the the deep person, or I'd love to work. And I've often said this, if you've been on BasTalk before, that you clearly at work you're not here to win a popularity contest. You're also not there to be the worst person to work for, right? You don't have to be this people pleaser across the spectrum, but also the reverse shouldn't be true. Nobody wants to work with you, and that's a bad position to be in, isn't it? And so how do you balance it out? How do you balance your personal branding? What do you do consistently? Do you only engage with your colleagues or your stakeholders when you have work with them? Do you need uh, or you need something from them? Or do you engage with them on different conversations at different times and try and build a rapport? I know it could also be seen as you sucking up to them, trying to flatter them and all those things. And there will be those comments that, oh, look, he's hanging out with this manager only to please them. And, well, it's a free, free world. Why don't you do it as well? Um, There are managers who see through the flattery, and there are those who just love it. They just love the fact that somebody is being, praising them or being subservient. They don't like a junior questioning them all the time. So there are most managers, I would say, who love being unquestioned, and so they tend to look at them more favorably. It's also this. We have had an episode on this before. It's called the God complex, where you think you're infallible, you don't listen to others, and you only want people who listen to you, and it's there. But it's important that you build your brand at work, and people will remember you. The HRBP will remember you for that. The sales leaders, the managing directors, the stakeholders, the skip level, they will all remember you for the brand that you bring to the table. Many moons ago, we had a gentleman that I knew was, he, let's not put genders to it, but their, their what was superpower. Yeah, that's the word I was searching for. Their superpower was to be relatable, to be super connected with leadership. Like they would present themselves as, look, I'm this young executive who's full of energy, and I'll do and toe the line exactly what you say. The gentleman was again, I let it out. Okay, it's a gentleman. Okay. See, so difficult to be neutral, gender neutral, and speak. It doesn't always come to us naturally. And I'm trying hard. I'm really trying hard to do that. But this person kept on presenting himself as, look, I'm in line, I'm aligned already, and reiterating almost ad verbatim what the leadership would say. And they loved him for that. Whereas many others who also delivered similar or better results but did not necessarily toe the same vocabulary were found to be less preferred for anything important that came up. So this personal branding really works. In another situation, this person always would wear extra formals in an environment where it was not required, but they did, and they were appreciated for that. And despite many leaders telling them not to do it or not required, but they maintained, and that's a brand that many people remember, or visual many people remember, even till date, if you will. So personal branding at work matters. Next, correcting false perceptions. Take practical steps. Once you can sense it, you can sense in multiple conversations that a perception is built. Sometimes people think you are stupid, and so they will try and patronize you. They will give you all the, because in their mind they're thinking you are naive, you're a softie, and in their mind they think that you are this silly little person who needs to be almost parented, because in your communication with them, you've been quiet, or you've been generally probably a bit too polite and not argued and all that. Whereas they have been used to being argued, or for them, it's, well, the person doesn't have a backbone, the person doesn't take a stance. And in your mind, you're thinking, well, the maturity curve is such that what's the point in this argument? Let's get on with life and get it done the way they want. And so between these unsaid conversations, a perception is formed, which you get a sense in subsequent conversation situations, be it the cafeteria, be it a customer meeting that you're going. You're not allowed to speak suddenly. Or maybe a stakeholder is come visiting, and you say, no, no, you don't need to present, because they're not confident that you will make 100% accurate presentation. And maybe if you do something wrong, their impression will go for a toss. And then they make it up to you later saying, oh, don't worry. I got you covered, and you'll get your time in the sun and all that. So there is a perception emanating, which you can sense. Your spidey senses will be all over, and so you need to correct those false uh, uh, perceptions. And so seek feedback, clarify intentions, control the narrative. So seek feedback regularly. Well, don't make it like weekly, but at least once in 3 4 months, have a downtime conversation. saying, "Hey, look, uh, this is not an appraisal tied conversation." But 2 3 times I sensed that maybe I wasn't articulating myself well enough, but I just wanted to and choose the moment wisely when it is not just back in the back of a heated argument or a back of a difficult situation. It's when the temperatures are calm and people are in a relatively decent mood, preferably if it is not at work, maybe just you're at an event or something towards the end of the event when people are far relaxed and stuff like that. So make use of that opportunity to reset the clock, as it were. Clarify the intentions that you don't meant any harm, and the reason you did not argue back was you thought that would be disrespectful or something. And so, therefore, you slowly control the narrative of what you want to say and what your body language says or what your vocabulary says. So, use this maybe in your one on ones to reset how your boss perceives your contributions. Next, when perceptions become a team culture, how leaders' perceptions create what, let's say, group think. Well, the whole group starts to unite and think the same. The favorite versus outsider syndrome in sales or in teams. What happens is typically when a leader is very strong, alpha leaders as they're known as, they tend to have low EQ. And once they have low EQ, emotional quotient, they tend to fall back on old school management styles, very directive communication, very prescriptive, very 1 2 3 kind of thing. They have lost out on the patience, on hearing you out, on trying different things. So what it does is it silently creates a group think across teams where they fall in line, and a perception that emerges that, look how I've got the team to follow exactly what I want them to do. But it couldn't be farther from the truth. The group unites to address this alpha leader, saying, let's not argue with them. Let's move out the first opportunity that we get. And of course, the leaders can argue, well, if they leave, good riddance to bad rubbish. I anyways didn't want such people. What happens is then the replacements who come in, they also fall into the same group think. Group think has a lasting legacy. It has a lingering effect. This lingering effect, it's this afterglow, as it were. I know that's a wrong example. What happens is there is residue. What the right word I was trying to search for is a residue, that even if many of those erstwhile members have left, there is a cultural residue that remains, and the new members who join in immediately get sucked into that, and the group think starts to take shape of a relay race. And it takes time for these alpha leaders to realize that they are not actually cracking the code on this, but they're actually creating a bigger mess. And turns out many a times these situations go under the radar because a leader can spin the story in multiple ways. They can say disgruntled employee, like and they are never happy. And look, and especially when the person has not done well, Mr. Goal, Mr. Target, deadline, whatever, then the tag line of justifying to say their seniors or HR or HRBP or whatever, a disgruntled employee. And if the employee is very successful, then it could be, oh, arrogant employee. Just because they've got met a project deadline or got a new customer or something like that, they've become arrogant. And so it can be spun in multiple ways, and it takes a long time, unfortunately, for the reset at the leadership to happen, and much until there is a lot of collateral damage that goes goes by way of the company which could have probably, or business which have probably could have grown, say, high double digits, 15 17 20% is growing at maybe 7 8 or 10%. And the impression people give upstairs is, look how good this is, that despite all the constraints we are going at 7 and 10. Whereas the reality is that it could actually be almost double that amount, 14 or 15%. And so these things never get found out until much later. And by that time, much of the damage has been done. Um, damage by way of slowing the velocity of growth for the company, department, business, whatever you want to call it. And um, and the people who are lost along the way, they go on to find some other role and probably land up in a similar situation, worst, right? That frying pan to fire. And so that's, I know this is sounding a bit depressing, but what do you do? Like, this is reality. This is how things usually turn out in most places. I'm sure there are workplaces where this is not happening, and there are right culture checks and mechanisms in place where people identify and see through what's going on, and then some action is done, uh, and some action is taken. There are instances where the it's just not about the leader, it's also about the teams. Sometimes the teams become very hostile. They unite to become hostile. They try multiple things. They try reaching out to other leaders and play the victim card. The teams sometimes reach out to HRBP and complain about the leader. They try to reach out to skip level. And so that is also very, very toxic, because just because somebody has had if a leader has had a tough love conversation, that is no reason to suddenly go and paint the leader as a villain. Because if nobody, one has to hear both sides of the story, and it'll always be, or always has to be, without retaliation. It always has to be without the fear of uh, being or jeopardized. My career will get jeopardized if you get to know that. If that fear prevails, then people will never speak up. Likewise, if a leader is always blamed for every time a team is complaining or whining, then you will never find a solid, strong leader to lead the business. So you see how difficult or how complicated or how complex this is, because both sides, both the opposites, have a success and a failure angle to the story. If the leader is very strong, that is very good, but it can have a negative impact. If the leader is weak and the result is good or bad, that has a negative impact too. On the other hand, if the team is playing nasty and the leader is strong, it could lead to conflict. That is both good and bad impact. So there is no unified pattern. It is, it almost cancels each other out, and that's why it probably continues the way it is in today's shape, size, or form. That many a times there are leaders who pay the price for it, and many a times there are the team or the people or the reporting people who pay the price for it. But when I say pay the price for it, face the brunt, either they leave the job or they leave the department or the role and try something else, or in cases of leaders, then they look for alternative roles and get a move on. The brand of the company is somewhat damaged, if you will, because word never remains with it, these people. It always spreads. But like they say, some organizations get into a stage of too big to fail. There always will be a set of people who will dislike a company, right? So they fall into a minor category, whereas the company always works on the majoritarian view, that look how good this organization is, how good their services are, their products are, right? So it's a gray area, to say the least. But net, all I'm saying is invest in credibility. Consistency beats a one-off brilliance, right? So there is this perception battle that you will have to fight periodically, and be proactive and not reactive. Right? You will sense it. Your spider senses will tell you that this is not sounding right, or this is not sounding good. Don't let it fester. have a diplomatic way of addressing it and see if that works. And if all of this doesn't work, don't get worked up, whether you're a leader listening to this or a individual contributor or whatever. It's not worth getting worked up, right? Beyond a point, don't let it affect you, impact you. If you are a good player, you will not become a bad player. You will always remain a good player, right? So give back yourself, back your confidence, back facts. So it shouldn't be that you're super confident, and but when fact checked, people found out that a lot of it was missing. So that can't be the case either. So that's that, and that's it. Very complicated, complex topic, I know, but it's, as the cliche goes, strategy takes a backseat when culture is, or culture eats strategy for breakfast, is what I was thinking. And so at work, reality is often filtered through the lens of perception. You cannot control the lens, but you can control the way you show up. It's very important. Let me know what you think about this gray area. Have you faced any prejudice because of the way you present yourself? Are you one of those people who have gained because of positive optics or body language? That'd be an interesting one. See if that can be replicated for others. Leave me a comment. You know where to reach me. You can go on www.bastalk.in. That's BASTALK.in. You can find me on LinkedIn. That is IN/IronBan. You can go on platform X, hashtag Ionisms, AAYANISMS. That's the fastest way. And there is an option to even leave a voicemail. How cool is that? So leave a voice note on the website and I will get some messages to see if I could bring this up in our next conversation. So until we meet the next time, please, I know the times are tough, situations around geopolitically are not looking so great. And so, job wise, hold tight, stay strong, stay safe, stay calm, and keep listening to Bus Talk. This is your host, Ian, and I wish you a great week ahead.